think the way I approached the question was thinking like what gets me excited in the morning. And ultimately it's being able to have the freedom to have ownership over my time, ownership over uh, my mind, and ownership over what I do. So I think if I had to boil it down into one concept, it would be freedom.
So today I have Vishal joining me, who is the COO of WEquil Group, and we are just going to talk about some of the things that he's doing within WEquil Group, outside of WEquil Group, who he is, and yeah. So the first question is, what are your passions?
Awesome. So first of all, thank you, Sumay and Aila, for having me on this Innovator series. I've watched a couple episodes already and always enjoy the interviews. So I'm glad to be a part of this one as well. So the first question is, what is my passion? So I spent quite a while thinking about it, and initially I thought it was a pretty hard question, to be honest, because I think what was going on was I was trying to boil it down into like one word or one concept, like trying to figure out like what's that one single thing that drives me every day. And I think I came to realize that uh, there isn't just one thing. Um, the things that drive me every day could change day to day, could change week to week, month to month, could change depending on what phase I'm in my life. So I think the way I approached the question was thinking like what gets me excited in the morning. And ultimately it's being able to have the freedom to have ownership over my time, ownership over uh, my mind, and ownership over what I do. So I think if I had to boil it down into one concept, it would be freedom. And the way I define freedom is that there's a couple things. There's freedom over time, freedom over finances, and then freedom over the mind. So I think having all those things and having that ability to be able to choose what you want to do on a daily basis, I think that's ultimately my passion. So if I had to describe it shortly, it would be enabling myself, but then also helping enable others to achieve this sense of freedom and this ability to take ownership of one's life. Some people define that as equilibrium. I'm calling it freedom, but I think the concepts are similar.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you mean by like freedom over mind?
Yeah. So freedom over the mind. The way I describe it is um, obviously the mind is something that it's obviously a very useful thing, and it's a part of who we are. But at the same time, if one doesn't have control over their mind, it's difficult to be present with certain situations. So let's say I have freedom over my time and freedom over money. So I have the ability to do what I want. And let's say I'm on vacation, I'm at the beach. Um, finances are taken care of. I have time to do whatever I want. But then let's say my mind is somewhere else, like it's worried about something, whether that's a relationship or the stock market or whatever. Like if your mind is worried about something else, I feel like that's an inability to have freedom or control over the mind. So that's kind of what I'm referring to is the ability to use your mind effectively when you need to, but at the same time have that ability to be present when you want to be as well. So that's kind of how I think of it. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. One thing is, I don't actually really, I mean, kind of the path that led you to us. I know that you were
Mhm.
you've kind of found us through WeQuil Capital and then
Mhm.
following that. But like, what got you interested in following like WeQuil Capital and kind of like the things that led up to that?
Yeah, so the story is, so that came from a desire for financial freedom. So that's why I kind of got interested interested in investing and how to take care of finances and how to grow finances and compounding and things like that. So um, I started in that journey early this year, and I started kind of not knowing too much about what I was doing, just kind of jumping into it head first and meeting some resistance right away. Things not going as planned, so that led me to try to understand what I was doing, to try to understand the economy, try to understand what is finance, what is investing, So I spent some time on Twitter, following different people, just trying to get a sense of what was going on. And for the most part, I wasn't able to understand why stocks were responding the way they were, why volatility was happening. But then I came across an article by Intuit Econ, which is now WEquil Capital. And so I read that article. It was called Why Tech Crashed. And this, I think it was published in February, if I'm not mistaken. And that article, I read through it and I was like, okay, this, it seems like I'm reading something that actually makes sense, and that isn't just, the narratives that I've been hearing from everyone else. Like it seemed like there was actual unique thought into this. So that's what got me into it. But it was really the pursuit and the desire for financial freedom and educating myself on that, because I think that's something that's really important, especially for people to start at a young age.
Yeah. What is your story? I guess that kind of is related, but
Story. Okay. So I guess just a little background. So I'm from Panama, born and raised. I'm 24 years old. My parents are both from India, but they've been here in Panama for almost 40 years now, I think. 30 something years. So growing up, I went to an international school, so I was pretty surrounded by a lot of different cultures. I had friends from the US, I had friends from Europe, from Panama, from Latin America. So that kind of helped me develop a pretty global perspective. After high school, and I guess just a little bit more about my schooling in general was, I grew up as a pretty quiet and shy person for the most part. I was pretty quiet all the way up until maybe my sophomore year or junior year of high school. And the thing that kind of got me out of my shell, funny enough, was weightlifting. So I was actually like a really tiny, skinny kid for most of my life. I weighed about 110 pounds, 115 pounds, like really small, scrawny guy. And the thing that kind of helped me get out of that was weightlifting, and it was that constant progression, that feeling of progression, that feeling of overcoming struggle. That helped me break out of my shell and be more, social and confident. And I think, people can achieve that through many different ways. Some people do it, through professional, career advancements. Some people do it through other forms of exercise. For me, it was that was kind of the thing that sparked a big change in my life. So I ended up becoming, I started progressing towards becoming a more social, more confident person towards like the later years of my high school. And from there, I went and I studied in USC in California. So I spent 4 years in California studying business, and I have my thoughts about that. I had a really good experience overall, but I have my thoughts about how it's kind of, I feel like going straight from high school into higher education, I think for most people is maybe not the best thing, because I went in there really not knowing what I wanted to do or get out of it. I think that's a struggle that a lot of people have. Maybe we can get into that conversation more later. Since, obviously with WEquil Group, we talk a lot about rethinking education, future of education, things like that. But I finished my studies, and then I came back to Panama, still kind of confused, like, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? And I think that's another common issue with people who go straight from school to college and then, are expected to figure out what they want to do in their life. But yeah, I spent some time working with my family. I still do, and I enjoy it, but I also am adding more things to my life. One of those things is WEquil Group, which is a project that I'm enjoying a lot and getting a lot from.
yeah. I mean, I think it's also you kind of have to go and choose something, but if you haven't really explored what you want to do, then I think that's one of the things that I just, like, some people would ask me, oh, do you want to go to college? And I'm thinking, like, I don't want to box myself in where I feel like, okay, I spent 4 years, I paid all this money to do this one thing, and then you kind of have pressure to continue doing that one thing because you've invested so much into it. and so the opportunity cost of like turning back and trying to do something new is so high that you're kind of forcing yourself into one thing. Yeah, I mean, but how did you kind of handle that? Did you did you study anything in particular that you were like kind of trying to feel things out, or what was
Yeah.
that like?
So I will say this: the overall experience of college for me was very positive, very favorable. Of course, it comes at a big cost, both in time and money. So you can weigh those out, but the experience overall was very good. I think the problem was more so going straight from high school to college. I think a lot of people would probably benefit from whether it's a gap year or just a buffer period where they can kind of explore what they want to do, because I really don't think most people come out of high school knowing what they want to spend the next 4 years of their life studying. But as far as like my particular studies, it was general in business, so it tackled things like marketing, finance, real estate finance, investments, um, operations as well. So it was like a pretty general, like, you just get a really good feel for business as a whole, which I think was useful. I think there's probably many ways to learn that stuff a lot faster. Um, but the main thing I got from college was kind of the experience of being away and on my own for 4 years, and meeting friends on my own, and it was like kind of a formative time of my life in that sense. But as far as like the actual studies, they were useful, but I just think there's faster and better ways to gain that knowledge and gain those skills. So for example, one thing is we I spent a lot of time studying finance in college, but you the fastest way I found to learn finance is to actually be invested, because then you really do care. So it's totally different. It expedites um, your knowledge and your ability to retain information and actually learn by real experience when you're doing it. So um, it's not for everyone, but there is a place for higher education, I think, and there's always alternatives. So no one should feel like they need to or that they can't. It's an option, I think.
Yeah. Um, do you see yourself as an innovator, and if so, why?
Yeah, it's hard to answer, to be honest. I think it depends on the context, right? So you could ask yourself, like, are you an innovator in context of relative to the whole world? I think that's really hard, because um, I guess it depends how you define innovator, right? If we're defining innovator as someone who's creating a new, unique solution to a problem, I find that it's challenging to be one in the context of the whole world, just because there's so many ideas, so many technologies, so many innovations. Um, so in that sense, I wouldn't call myself one just yet. I don't think I've reached, I've gotten that status just yet. But if I boil it down into something more specific, like I've been innovative within my family business. I've been innovative within WEquil Group. If I kind of bring it down to a to more specific level, I could say yes. I think being an innovator at the end of the day comes down to a mindset thing. It's about uh, do you have that mentality where is it your priority to come up with unique solutions to problems? And I think most of us do have that. Um, so in that sense, I feel like I have the innovator spirit. But as far as coming up with innovations that have impacted the world in general, I think I'm on that path, but not yet. I wouldn't call myself one just yet.
All right. Yeah, I heard you in the other room, and I had to come in and weigh in on this.
I have a question.
Great. I'll leave it here in a second, because this is Sumay's series, and this is the first time that I've done this, busting in on it. But since the first time I've met Vishal, and I think the same goes for his brother Rishi, the reason why I hired them pretty much on the spot, and now they're two of the closest people in the leadership team at WEquil Group, is because they live and breathe innovation. They're incredibly flexible. They are always looking for ways to do things better. They're all about first principle thinking. And yeah, I'm just incredibly grateful to have you guys on the team. But as far as I'm concerned, you are most definitely an innovator. Your whole family lives and breathes innovation. The story of what you guys did during the pandemic, the way that you were able to drive success for your family's business when businesses around the world were crumbling, and you're questioning whether or not you're truly an innovator. You're a humble innovator.
Thank you.
And I'm very grateful to have you in this team. All right, sorry for hijacking.
I appreciate that.
Uh,
Yeah, sure. Aila, go ahead.
I have two questions. First of all, what happened with what my dad was saying? And the second one is, if you could use 3 words to describe yourself, what would they be?
Okay. Okay, so I'll start off with the first question about what your dad was mentioning with the pandemic was, so during the pandemic, Panama went into like a pretty, severe lockdown. Businesses were shut. We were forced to stay at home pretty much for several months, like for most of the pandemic. And we got to a point where at a certain stage of the progression of reopening, businesses were allowed to reopen, but for delivery only. So our family business is in retail electronics, so selling things like televisions, appliances, kitchen equipment, things like that, like all that kind of stuff. So we have that retail business, but we had never really had a delivery system. It was all like, everything was done in store. It was all physical. And so when we reached that stage of the reopening in the pandemic where it was deliveries only, we had to really quickly improvise and figure out how are we going to do this, like, because we didn't want to just remain shut during the whole time. We wanted to operate while we could. And so we from one day to the next, we decided, okay, we're just going to start doing deliveries now. And we opened our Instagram and said, okay, make your orders through Instagram DMs. We didn't have like a proper system in place where like someone would just go on the website and pay on the website, and it would have, and all the deliveries would be coordinated. It was kind of like we had to bootstrap it. And so we opened our Instagram DMs. We set up a WhatsApp number where our clients could contact us. And from one day to the next, we had a delivery system, and it worked. It got us through, the pandemic for several months. We operated that way at home. That was the first time we've ever operated remotely. Otherwise, we had been operating like from the stores itself. So we were forced to, I guess you could say, we were forced to innovate pretty rapidly and come up with a solution at a very quick pace. It was literally from one day to the next. One day we had no delivery system, the next day we had something, and there were some growing pains with it. It was challenging. There were some difficulties with it, but it was a solution that worked, and it was very helpful for us during the pandemic. And then your second question was 3 words to describe myself. Okay. Well, so I wrote about this in my About Me project, which everyone who wants to join WEquil Group is, we're now asking everyone who wants to join WEquil Group to submit an About Me project so we can learn more about each other. But essentially what I wrote about was the words that I feel that describe me the best, at least at this stage in my life, are positive, lighthearted, and supportive. And the reasons I picked those words is that I'm quite fortunate to be at a place in my life where most of the challenges and difficulty that I face are created by myself. So, and what I mean by that is financially stable, have a good, happy family. I'm healthy. So any kind of difficulty I have in my life is something that's created by myself, something that that is unnecessary. So one of the things that I really, that I really value in my life is positivity, because I really have, if I'm positive and I'm positive for the people around me and for myself, then I really shouldn't have any true, difficulty in my life. I should be able to go by living a good, happy life. The other thing is lightheartedness, and the reason I picked that word is I really do feel that a lot of people take themselves a little bit too seriously, myself included many times. And I think, to me, my goal in my life is just to have, a whole lot of fun and help, the people around me to have more fun as well, and to be comfortable and safe. But I think a big part of that starts with lightheartedness. Of course, we got to acknowledge the reality and know that there are many difficulties in life for a lot of people. But I think a lot of the times we make things to be more serious than they are. We stress ourselves more than we need to. And if we're just a bit more lighthearted and we flow through life a bit more, we're not only doing a service to ourselves, but to others as well, because that allows us to help others better, to be more focused, to be more relaxed, and to be a service to others. So I really do value lightheartedness, and that's something that I think is a word that describes me quite a bit. And the last is supportive, and supportive kind of goes with what I was mentioning earlier, was that life can be challenging and chaotic. No matter, how you have it, no matter how wealthy you are, how comfortable you are, like, life is chaotic and things can be challenging. And one day you can be on top of the moon, and the next day you can just be feeling, really bad and not good. So being supportive to me is important, because it's acknowledging that people have difficult times and difficult days, and I want to be there for those people, just like I would want someone to be there for me when I'm having a tough time. So I'd say those are probably the three words that at least describe me at this stage in my life.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
So what are the skills you wish you learned when you were young?
Skills I wish I learned when I was young. Okay. Coding is one, 100%. Financial literacy is another one. I wanted to learn more technical skills. So things like using Photoshop or using Adobe After Effects, which my brother knows how to use, and I'm learning. I wish I learned, hard skills like that when I was younger. I feel those are in such high demand, but they're also really fun to use. So, for example, being able to use Adobe, Photoshop, or Illustrator.
Adobe.
I like digital art a lot. Sorry?
What's Adobe?
Oh, Adobe is the company that creates the software for Photoshop and Illustrator. It allows you to design things, and but I like digital art a lot, but my main bottleneck is actually creating it, like knowing the technical side of how to create it. So I wish I had learned skills like that when I was younger. So really, it's like skills would be tools. So I think tools like, like I mentioned, Photoshop, financial literacy tools as well, I wish I learned more of. And then um, physical education is another thing I wish I learned more of. So knowing, like, understanding how the body works, stretching, working out, whether it's cardio or weightlifting, whatever. I wish I knew more about that when I was younger. I picked that up, when I was late in high school. I wish I had started that stuff at a younger age. And then martial arts is probably the last one. I wish I had started that as a kid. That's something I think everyone should learn. And I think it's cool that both of you guys are doing that at such a young age as well. So
Sumay is Grandmaster Black Belt.
Black belt. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those things are also just, I mean, yeah, like the skills that you learn from it. It's not kind of like the knowledge of, like, this is a kick. It's like the skill of being able to control your movement and things like balance. And yeah, I mean, and that's just something that you can utilize with everything else. So
Mhm.
yeah.
The only thing I think is unnecessary about Taekwondo is push-ups. They make you do so much push-ups.
It's like, for a break, let's do 10.
Yeah, push-ups are not so fun sometimes. I agree.
Yeah.
But you make a good point, like those, what you're saying about the ability to learn how to do a kick. I think that kind of thinking process, because when you're thinking about how do you do a kick, you're breaking it down into many different parts, right? Like the way your hip rotates, the way you engage certain muscles, the way you have your balance. So it's like you're very much focused on the alignment of your body on very like specific details. I think that way of thinking is beneficial to a lot of things. Like you can apply that way of thinking to, let's say if you start learning yoga, you could apply that same way of thinking of being hyper aware of the little details, right? Or this is kind of a, I like playing video games a lot too. When I play video games the same way. I approach them thinking about every single little detail, just the same way I would if I was, throwing a punch or doing a kick, like just the details of the mechanics of how it works. I think if you apply that thinking, that very detail oriented thinking, you can apply that to many things that you do, whether it's physical or not.
So the lesson, kids, is that you should play video games.
Yeah, you could play them, but play them, with try to put your head into it. If you're playing them, try to understand what you're doing. Think about why you're doing certain things. It's at the end of the day, it's not so much about what activity you're doing. It's about how you approach it and your mindset going into it. So we can take WEquil Craft for an example. The idea when someone enters WEquil Craft, which is, WEquil Group's, Minecraft server where kids learn about 3D modeling, architecture, design, is they go in and they're approaching it through the lens of a student, someone who wishes to learn. Okay, when they see a cool castle, they want to learn, okay, how is this castle constructed? What kind of foundation does it have? Is it, would it work in real life? Is it structurally good? So things like that. It depends how you approach it. I think you can apply that to anything, whether it's video games or whatever else, or exercise. It's about being conscious of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So I think that mindset is useful no matter what.
Yeah, definitely. This one, I always like asking this one, but what is a point of view that you hold? What is a belief or point of view that you hold that is not shared by most other people?
Belief that I hold that's not shared by most people. Man, I don't want to repeat myself so much, but I think it's what I was talking about earlier about how people take themselves too seriously for the most part. I really do think that's the big one, because I think a lot of the dissatisfaction, a lot of the resistance that we feel in life is self-imposed because we take ourselves too seriously. Okay, so that's actually reminding me of the answer I want to give, which is, again, in my about me article, I talked about taking the path of least resistance, right? So what I mean by that is I think a lot of times we add unnecessary resistance to our life, and I think if you go through life, no matter what, you're gonna come through resistance. You're gonna face resistance. So when someone talks about the path of least resistance, it's not referring to the path of no resistance, because if you're going through life, you're gonna have challenges. No matter what, the world is chaotic. Things can go wrong. Things will go wrong, and you're always going to overcome. You're always going to face resistance. What I'm referring to is adding resistance, in a manner that's not controlled, if that makes sense. So I'm a firm believer that in our life we should be adding controlled resistance. We should challenge ourselves. We should see where our limits are, see what we can do. We should challenge ourselves, but be in control of that. And I think the belief I have is that most of us, or a lot of us, fall into this thing where we add unnecessary resistance into our lives, like overthinking certain problems that we may not have control over, or making things seem as making problems out of nothing is another thing that I think a lot of us do. And I really believe that's not a healthy way to live life, in my opinion. and that's something that we should strive to be aware of and cognizant of. So does that make sense? I'm not sure if I explained that as well as I
Yeah,
could.
yeah. I mean, I don't think that that's something that people necessarily disagree with. I think it's something that people aren't really aware of. They don't really realize that they could be thinking about something that they do have control over, and
Yeah.
that kind of focusing on some of these things really isn't the best way to go about making your life better, or just your mental health in general.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I agree with that, but I think the other side is glorifying struggle and challenge, right? So many times you'll hear people gloat about how much they work or how little they slept, or like how challenging their life is, or things like that.
That's not just adults. When I was in public school, everybody was just like, I went to bed at 12.
Yeah, exactly.
And like bragging about that.
So I agree. Yeah, I think that's the big thing, is like glorifying that struggle, that a harder life is a more noble life, or things like that. I don't agree with. I think you should try to make things as easy for yourself as you can, while also having that controlled resistance or controlled challenge, where you build mental fortitude, through things like taekwondo, for example. That's like a controlled resistance, in my opinion. Like you're challenging yourself in a way that is manageable for you, but you keep progressing. So you're just, you do grow a thicker skin doing stuff like that. You do shape yourself doing stuff like that. But the key is being in control of that, or not letting it get out of hand, and not glorifying the struggle, not trying to make your life harder than it is, just to say just to say you're able to live a very difficult life. That's what I think.
Or to try to convince yourself of something, like, look
Yeah.
at being productive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can people get a hold of you if they are interested in what you do?
Okay, so there's a couple ways. My profile is on wequil.com, so I'm there. If you want to look me up on LinkedIn, my name is Vishal Daryanani, and I'm pretty sure that'll be linked on the YouTube video. Twitter as well. I'm active on Twitter. Just getting that started. My username is @VishalInvests, so you can find me there on Twitter. I'm usually trying to talk a little bit about markets and learning technologies and things like that. So I'm just getting started there as well. I'd say those are probably the best ways to get in touch with me.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, unless you want to mention anything else, I think we can wrap this up. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, just like
I
a couple.
have one last question.
Sure, yeah, let's hear it.
What are you doing for Thanksgiving?
For Thanksgiving, okay, so we don't really celebrate it over here, but I do want to take advantage of the occasion and the celebration. So I don't have concrete plans just yet, but I will figure something out very shortly, because I do like taking advantage of celebrations and holidays, even if our family doesn't specifically celebrate them.
I thought you were gonna throw an epic late lifting Thanksgiving party.
You know what? Maybe we could do that. That could be one part of it, followed by a really nice feast and a good meal. I don't have a clear answer for you, but just know that I will be trying to make the most out of that day. So,
Okay, that's it.
all right, cool. All right, guys.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Sumay. Thank you, Aila.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.